Do you cut in like the funny bits as well, or I don't know? Or is it all, do you prefer it to be quite serious? Because I can't remember what I said. Calling myself a chef kind of gives the impression that I know how to do a lot of things that I don't know how to do. I'm not classically trained, and quite often people ask me, you know, how do I cook this or how do I do that? I'm like, I don't know, because the way I cook is very instinctual. I kind of just make it up as I go along. And I'm a big believer that there should be no rules when it comes to cooking. I grew up in Italy because my dad worked with Italian wines, so I was exposed to some like really great Tuscan food from a very young age, and also Brazilian food. My mum's Brazilian, and Mexican food because my dad's dad lived in Mexico. People always ask me like, what's the overlap in those three cuisines, and I think the only overlap in this context is kind of me and just the fact that I grew up with those cuisines. So now when I'm cooking, I feel like I can just draw from all of those. It just sort of is a subconscious thing rather than a conscious decision. As long as it tastes good, I think it makes sense. So mezcla means mix or blend or fusion in Spanish. So the book is about fusion cooking. The introduction is about my love for Brazil, Mexico, and Italy, and a lot of my favorite recipes in the book are a sort of a mezcla, a mix of those three cuisines. So I'm making my prawn and habanero lasagna, which is my favorite recipe from Mezcla, and it's a great sort of representation of Mezcla because it's a little bit Mexican, the habanero, obviously very much Italian because it's a lasagna. And in its sort of first incarnation, there was a Brazilian element in there too. So first we need to start off by making the ragu, and it is a prawn ragu. So I'm just gonna finely chop the prawns, which is the base of the ragu. It kind of has the exact texture of a meat ragu, but with the taste of prawns. It's really special, I think, anyway. I've always been obsessed with food. I've been obsessed with food since I had sort of conscious thought, but it definitely wasn't something that I thought I would do professionally. I tried out loads of different jobs. I was a travel agent for a while. I sold power and gas door to door. I started and quit a couple of art degrees. When I say it out loud, it seems so obvious that that should have been my calling because I was so obsessed with food, but it took me a while, and I certainly had no idea when I started out that recipe development was a job. I had no idea that the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen existed, so loads of different things to do with food, but not working in a restaurant kitchen, which I have so much respect for the people who do that because my favourite place to be is in a restaurant, but I'm not cut out for it. I made this for my launch party a couple of weeks ago and it went down a storm, and people are always like really surprised by it. They're like, prawn lasagna? What? But then when they try it, they're like, oh my God, this is really delicious. So to cook well at home, I think this is a really obvious answer that probably everyone says, but it's so important to taste as you go and to make sure that seasoning is just so important. You need a lot of pepper for this lasagna. So I said in the book, I think in the recipe, I say about 50 twists. So these tomatoes are kind of where I want them to be. So you can see the onions are softened, the tomatoes have sort of broken down and become sort of thickened, the oil's starting to split, so we're in a good place. So now I'm gonna add, well actually first I'm gonna turn the heat all the way up, and then I'm gonna add the prawns. Just give that a really good mix. My mum is an incredible person, but not very enthusiastic cook. That's kind of how I got into cooking because I felt that the food we were having at home was so boring, and my mum said to me at one point, she got so exasperated with the arguments that she used to have with this little kid that wanted nice food, that she sort of just said, you know, if you want all this food that you're talking about, you're just gonna have to learn how to cook yourself. So you can see the prawn liquid starting to come out of the prawns. So that's gonna get even more liquidy. Now we're just gonna keep on cooking it until that liquid's been reabsorbed into the prawns. So just to lock all that flavour in. My kitchen is very small. Well, actually it's not that small, but it's smallish, but you know, it's got everything it needs. I haven't actually done much to it since I moved in, apart from like add some shelves that have like dried chillies and things like that, put some art on the walls, lots of plants. It's a small space, but I love it. For now, it does the trick. So now that most of the liquid has been reabsorbed, I'm gonna add some tomato paste and miso, and then just cook that tomato paste out for about 3 minutes. I'm gonna add some wine and then let that bubble away. Also gonna add a very important ingredient, the habanero, which is gonna give it a really delicious, like fruity, smoky, hot chili-ness. It's my favorite dried chili. And now I'm just gonna add preferably fish stock, but I've actually only got water. So now we're just gonna let that simmer away for about 18 to 20 minutes. I definitely wouldn't have written Mezcla were it not for having worked in the test kitchen or having written Flavour. So I'm extremely grateful to Yotam, who's just been the most amazing boss, and layering flavours is something that I really learned from him, and textures as well. And I mean, I've always been a huge fan of citrus and herbs and chilies, but definitely that layering of flavour and layering of texture is such a sort of Ottolenghi hallmark. That's definitely something that I've been inspired by. Just get your oven preheated to about 200 degrees fan. So I think this ragu is pretty much ready. So I'm just going to taste it to make sure that, yeah, that's really good. And now we are ready to prepare the lasagna. So I'm going to start by putting a layer of lasagna in the bottom. And the great thing about these fresh ones is that you can just rip them really easily. Then cover with a layer of the ragu. And then I'm going to go with a good drizzle of cream all over, a layer of parmesan, and then also some chives. And then I'm just going to keep building that up. My best friend in Tuscany, her family ran a restaurant called La Casellina, and her granddad used to make all the pasta for the restaurant in their family house. So whenever I was at their house, I would always go and hang out with him, and he did it in the laundry room. So I was associate fresh pasta and laundry, like the smell of fresh laundry. So I spent a lot of time with her family. So that was very much a part of my childhood. So I've got this habanero oil, or you could use chili oil, or you could use just regular olive oil, whatever you like. But I do like to make this habanero oil to drizzle on. And now it's ready to go in the oven. If you're not a very confident cook, I would really recommend getting cookbooks from all over and getting to know different ingredients and different cuisines, because that's the only way that you'll start to feel confident in using those ingredients in your own cooking and coming up with your own combinations and mezclas, if you will. Okay, here we go, it's ready. So now it's time for the finishing touches. A little drizzle of cream. Seems unnecessary, but I promise you it's not. And then a drizzle of the habanero oil. And there we have my prawn and habanero lasagna. I haven't actually had any breakfast, so I'm really looking forward to this. My favorite recipe in Mezcla. It's very hot, but it's really good. It's also very spicy, but that's the way I love it. I hope you enjoy it too.